Every single day, millions of people wake up feeling behind, like they've already lost a race they didn't even know they were running. They scroll, compare, overthink, and then they freeze. Paralysis by perfection. They don't act. They wait for the perfect plan, the perfect mood, the perfect moment. And in that waiting, their life passes. But today, I want to say something that could change the way you move through the world. There is no such thing as perfection. There is only movement. And the only way to break free from this trap is to live by a principle called no 0 days. What does it mean? It means that no matter how small, how messy, or how unfinished, you do something every day. You don't let the day pass with a 0 next to it. 0 progress, 0 effort, 0 growth. You put something on the board, even if it's a scribble, even if it's one push up, one page, one tough conversation, one moment of brutal honesty with yourself. Perfection is a seductive idea. It whispers to us that if we just get everything exactly right, if we prepare enough, plan enough, wait long enough, then we'll finally be ready to act. But beneath that illusion is a deeply rooted neurological trap. Perfectionism isn't a standard of excellence. It's a fear response. And if you look at the science, it becomes clear that this fear hijacks the very systems of the brain required for change, action, and growth. When you strive for perfection, your amygdala, the brain's threat detection system, lights up. This area is designed to protect you from danger. But when perfection becomes the standard, every deviation from ideal becomes a threat. A missed word, a bad workout, a failed attempt. The brain doesn't see these as harmless learning curves. It sees them as risks to safety, to identity, to worth. And in that threat state, your body goes into freeze mode. This is why so many people who struggle with perfectionism also battle procrastination. The brain, flooded with cortisol and overstimulation, avoids the very thing it claims to want. It's not laziness. It's neurological overload. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for planning, decision-making, and focused effort, becomes impaired under chronic perfection-driven stress. When this part of the brain is offline or diminished, you can't think clearly, organize your actions, or initiate change. You sit there, overanalyzing, second-guessing, and silently breaking down. This is the dark side of perfection. It creates a loop in which the more you care, the less you do. Progress, on the other hand, is a completely different neural experience. When you choose to act, even in a small and imperfect way, you activate the brain's reward system. Dopamine, the molecule of motivation, is released not when you achieve something massive, but when you move toward something meaningful. It reinforces behavior. It makes the brain say, do that again. And this is the most important insight. The brain doesn't reward the result. It rewards the process. When you complete a task, no matter how small, the basal ganglia and associated reward pathways begin to automate that behavior. The action becomes easier next time. And when you do it again the following day, your brain begins to interpret that as your new identity. This is how new neural circuitry forms. This is how people go from stuck to unstoppable. They don't wait for perfect conditions. They create a feedback loop through action. One of the reasons perfection feels so enticing is because it gives a false sense of control. It feels like if you just plan harder, think deeper, wait longer, you'll eliminate all chances of failure. But you can't eliminate risk from real growth. Risk is embedded in the process of becoming. The only way to truly gain control is to act. To expose yourself to uncertainty and allow your brain to adapt. People stuck in perfectionism often say, I'll start when I feel ready. But that readiness never comes, because the longer you delay, the more your brain associates starting with danger. You build a neurological relationship between effort and fear. This is why no 0 days is such a powerful antidote. When you commit to doing something each day, no matter how small, no matter how messy, you interrupt the fear loop. You send a new message to your nervous system: movement is safe. Effort is not dangerous. Progress is possible. There is also an emotional shift that occurs when you stop chasing perfection and start embracing forward motion. You begin to release the shame that comes from constantly falling short of your own impossible standards. Shame is corrosive. It shuts down curiosity, kills creativity, and locks the brain into self-attack mode. But when you show up and take action, even imperfectly, you create self-respect. And respect is fuel. It gives you the energy to keep going, to build, to recover, to grow. So when you find yourself stuck, frozen by the need to get it all exactly right, remember what your brain is actually craving: safety, momentum, clarity. And the fastest way to give it those things is to act. Not perfectly, but persistently. The goal isn't flawless execution, it's nervous system retraining. It's reminding your brain that progress is the point, that you don't need to be perfect to move. You just need to move to change. Your brain is not measuring the size of your achievements, it's measuring patterns. It's watching what you do consistently, not what you do dramatically. That's the foundation of real transformation. We often think we need to do something massive to earn a breakthrough. Hours in the gym, writing an entire chapter in one sitting, launching the perfect business. But the truth is, your brain doesn't care how big the action is. It cares that you did something at all, and more importantly, that you do it again tomorrow. The human brain is a reward-seeking machine. It learns from patterns of cause and effect. When you do something that moves you even one step closer to a goal, your brain releases dopamine, the neurochemical that drives motivation, learning, and focus. And here's the key: dopamine doesn't require perfection. It doesn't wait for a gold medal moment. It responds to progress. Even a small step forward activates this system, reinforcing the idea that effort leads to reward. That's how habits are born. That's how identities are built. One repeated signal at a time. This is why the principle of no 0 days is so neurologically powerful. It works with the way the brain is wired. When you commit to never letting a day go by without doing something, even something small, you're building a consistent feedback loop. And feedback is how your nervous system decides what to keep and what to discard. Every repetition of action becomes more automatic. You don't just become more productive. You become more efficient. Your brain begins to allocate energy toward that behavior. It requires less conscious effort. It becomes a part of you. And that's where identity shifts occur, not in massive peaks of performance, but in the slow, almost invisible layering of behavior. You're not trying to prove something once. You're trying to become someone daily. That's a completely different game. One relies on adrenaline and luck. The other relies on neurobiology and consistency. Think of the difference between someone who writes one perfect page once a month versus someone who writes a sloppy paragraph every single day. Over time, the daily writer will outperform, outlearn, and outlast the perfectionist every time. Why? Because the daily writer is reinforcing action. They're building myelin, the biological insulation that strengthens neural pathways through repetition. That writer's brain is becoming more efficient at writing because it's being used to write often. The perfectionist, however, is only training their brain to stress and hesitate. They are reinforcing hesitation, overthinking, and avoidance. So if you want to grow, if you want to transform, don't chase scale, chase rhythm. Chase the ability to do something every day, regardless of how motivated you feel. Your brain doesn't need you to feel inspired. It needs you to be reliable. Reliability builds momentum. And momentum creates breakthroughs. There's something else that happens when you commit to daily, small actions. You begin to trust yourself, and that trust is not emotional fluff, it's neurological credibility. Your brain starts to anticipate follow through. You're no longer arguing with yourself each morning about whether you'll show up. You know you will, because you did yesterday and the day before. That continuity builds emotional stability, lowers cognitive friction, and frees up mental bandwidth. You're not wasting energy debating effort. You're using your energy to move. This is why so many people feel stuck when they try to go big too fast. Their nervous system isn't ready for the intensity, so they burn out, then they quit. Then they internalize failure. But when you start small and stay consistent, you train your system to handle more over time. You build capacity. Your brain adapts, and what felt hard last month becomes your new baseline. The truth is, small actions aren't small. They are the foundation of neural architecture. They are how you create a self that doesn't need motivation to move. They're how you build a brain that no longer doubts whether it's capable. So when you wake up and feel like the step you can take today is too insignificant to matter, remember, your brain disagrees. It's watching what you do, not what you wish you could do. It doesn't care how much. It cares that you showed up. That's what creates change. That's how you build a life with perfection, with presence, repetition, and the refusal to let a single day go to zero. Everything you do is either shaping who you are or reinforcing who you're not. Every action becomes a vote, not in some metaphorical or motivational sense, but in a neurological one. The brain is constantly building and refining your identity based on repetition. When you act, especially in alignment with the person you want to become, your brain treats that behavior as evidence. It doesn't wait for results. It processes the act itself as proof that a shift is underway. Identity isn't something you suddenly discover. It's not found, it's built through the accumulation of micro decisions made in the silence of your daily life. When you choose to take action, no matter how small, you're casting a vote for the version of yourself you're trying to become. And your brain, in response, begins to update the mental model it holds of who you are. It rewires your self-image in real time. This is not philosophy. This is neurobiology. When you consistently show up and do something that reflects discipline, growth, or resilience, you teach your nervous system that you are someone who acts, someone who doesn't break promises to yourself. These micro acts of integrity compound. The more you behave like a focused, healthy, driven person, the more your internal sense of self begins to match that. You become less reactive and more proactive. You stop asking, "Can I do this?" and start asking, "What would someone like me do next?" That shift in identity is the true lever of transformation. Most people focus on goals, thinking that achieving something big will change how they see themselves. But that's backwards. Real transformation begins when you behave differently first, even if your mind is full of doubt. Behavior changes belief, not the other way around. And when you understand this, you stop waiting to feel confident, capable, or ready. You realize the path forward is through the vote you cast today, even if it's a small one. The brain tracks these votes through neural reinforcement. Every time you complete a task, finish a workout, resist a distraction, or choose the hard thing over the easy one, you fire a set of neurons. When that circuit gets activated repeatedly, it strengthens. That's how habit circuits are formed. That's how identity-based behaviors are wired in. So if you show up daily, not perfectly, but consistently, your brain starts to see this as normal, and what once felt like effort soon becomes default. This process works in both directions. Just like taking action reinforces a strong identity, inaction reinforces weakness. When you procrastinate, avoid, or delay, your brain logs that too. It begins to associate challenge with avoidance, and slowly, you become someone who doesn't trust themselves. You internalize failure before you even attempt success. This is how people slowly lose confidence, not through huge failures, but through repeated micro-abandonments. That's why no 0 days is so essential. It's not just about checking a box. It's about showing up enough times that your brain believes a new story about you. When you break a 0 day with even the tiniest action, like reading one paragraph, drinking one glass of water, or writing one line, you're not just completing a task, you're voting. You're saying, "This is who I am now." And that's how you close the gap between who you are and who you want to be. It's not magic. It's mechanics, neural adaptation, identity recalibration. If you struggle with believing in yourself, don't try to fix that belief directly. Fix your actions. Make one small move toward the version of you that does believe. And then do it again tomorrow. Belief will catch up. Confidence is a trailing indicator of behavior repeated with courage. Most people try to think their way into a new life, but it's your actions that rewrite the script. It's your daily votes that shift the identity. Over time, those small votes form a majority. And when the majority of your days reflect progress, your brain stops doubting. It stops fighting you. It starts supporting the new you. This is how identity transformation happens, not by waiting for clarity, but by voting through action. One choice at a time. One non-0 day at a time. The person you become is the result of what you repeatedly do, not what you occasionally dream. So every day, cast a vote. Make it count. Your brain is watching. Your identity is listening. And the version of you you've always wanted to become is waiting, not for perfection, but for proof. The mind hates uncertainty. It craves control, clarity, and a sense of order. That's why inaction feels so tormenting. When you're stuck in indecision, when you're obsessing over what might go wrong, or waiting for the perfect time to act, your brain starts to spiral, cortisol rises. The amygdala, your threat center, fires up, pushing you into a state of internal panic. Your breathing gets shallow, your thoughts race. You analyze, overanalyze, and then paralyze. This is what happens when you let inaction rule your nervous system. It feeds anxiety. Most people think that anxiety is just an emotional problem, but it's actually a pattern of neurological activation. And the longer you stay still, mentally, physically, emotionally, the louder those fear circuits grow. Your brain is wired for prediction. It wants to know what's coming next. But when you sit in silence, in stagnation, doing nothing, your brain fills the vacuum with imagined threats. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? What if I mess it up? You begin to manufacture fear simply because you haven't given your brain anything real to process. Action is the antidote. When you move, when you do something, anything, no matter how small, you shift the balance of power inside your brain. You take energy away from the amygdala and hand it back to the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that is responsible for rational thinking, emotional regulation, and decision-making. Suddenly, what felt like a threat becomes manageable. You realize you're not as trapped as you thought you were. You're not drowning, you were just still. Even the smallest act can disrupt the anxious loop: standing up, walking, writing a sentence, sending the message you've been avoiding. These are not minor things. They are mechanisms. Because action sends your brain a signal it desperately needs to hear: I am not helpless. That one moment of movement begins to restore order to your mind. It replaces the chaos of thought with the clarity of experience. It gives your brain a job, and the brain loves jobs. It loves purpose. It calms down when it sees a direction. This is why the concept of no 0 days is so profound. It's not about checking a productivity box. It's about regulating your internal world by influencing your external behavior. You're not waiting to feel ready. You're not waiting for the anxiety to go away before you begin. You begin, and the anxiety starts to fade. You teach your system that progress is available even in discomfort. It's important to understand that emotion follows motion. That's not a motivational slogan. That's biology. Your state of mind is deeply influenced by your state of action. When you sit and do nothing, your mind feeds on uncertainty. When you move, your body cues the brain with a different story: we are safe. We are doing something. We are in control, and your brain believes it because your body becomes proof. Movement rewires the interpretation of fear. Anxiety and procrastination are two sides of the same coin. They both thrive in the absence of movement. That's why so many people stay stuck. They believe they need to feel better before they can do something. But it's the other way around. You do something, and then you feel better. That's how you take your power back. One tiny action done daily reestablishes trust within your system, not in some grand heroic way, but in a grounded biological way. Your nervous system begins to calm down, and your prefrontal cortex comes back online. You think clearer. You breathe deeper. You begin to move forward, not because the fear is gone, but because you've learned how to walk with it. The goal is not to eliminate anxiety forever. That's not how we're built. The goal is to interrupt its control. To remember that clarity is not found in overthinking, it's found in action. Every time you take even the smallest step, you're teaching your brain something vital. I am not a prisoner of fear. I am the one moving through it. No 0 days is not about perfection. It's about disrupting the loop. It's about replacing the anxiety that comes from doing nothing with the clarity that comes from doing something. And over time, those small decisions stack. They create a rhythm. And in that rhythm, anxiety loses its grip. Fear no longer makes the rules. You do. There is a hidden danger in letting even a single day pass without effort. Because the moment you choose not to show up, not to move, not to try, not to push even a little, you aren't just losing time. You're teaching your brain something much deeper. You're reinforcing the idea that it's okay to settle, that it's normal to delay, that maybe this isn't possible after all. That's the real cost of a 0 day. It isn't about productivity. It's about identity erosion. Slowly, quietly, your nervous system begins to forget what discipline feels like. Your self-image starts to drift. You lose trust in yourself. The human brain is a pattern recognition machine. When you skip a workout, abandon a goal, or postpone a hard task, you're not just missing a box on your to-do list, you're feeding a loop. The brain logs that behavior as a cue. It says, this is what we do when things are hard. We step back. We wait. We avoid. And the next time difficulty appears, that neural path is stronger. It becomes easier to quit, easier to opt out. Inaction repeated enough becomes a habit, a default, a way of being. On the surface, one missed day may feel insignificant. You justify it. You were tired, busy, overwhelmed. But the nervous system doesn't understand excuses. It understands signals. And every 0 day sends the same signal: I don't follow through. And when that message is repeated, it becomes identity. You go from being someone who is building something to someone who breaks promises to themselves. And nothing is more damaging than that silent erosion of self-trust. You stop believing in your own momentum. You stop expecting anything different from yourself. But when you do the opposite, when you refuse to let the day end without some kind of forward motion, even the smallest kind, you're teaching your brain a radically different message. I am someone who shows up no matter what. And that belief becomes your foundation. It gives you a sense of control even when life is chaotic. It creates stability in your nervous system. You stop being at the mercy of your moods. You stop being reactive. because now you have proof, real embodied proof, that you can follow through. No 0 days isn't about going all in every single time. It's not about maxing out your effort every day. It's about refusing to break the chain of progress. Even if it's 5 minutes, even if it's one line, even if all you can manage is the smallest effort, you still showed up. And that sends a powerful message to the brain. It reinforces a different loop: I take action, even when it's uncomfortable. And that repetition builds strength. It builds resilience. It builds identity. This is how self-confidence is really formed, not through motivational speeches or overnight success, but through daily deposits of discipline, through behavior, through casting votes over and over for the kind of person you're becoming. Your brain learns from what you do repeatedly, not what you intend. You might have big dreams, massive goals, and a powerful vision. But if your daily actions don't reflect those desires, your brain doesn't register them as real. The only reality it trusts is the one you reinforce, and you reinforce it through repetition. That's why 0 days are so dangerous. They aren't just days off. They're signals of identity drift. They are missed opportunities to confirm to your brain, to your body, and to your entire system who you really are. Because when you stop reinforcing the idea that you are capable, determined, and committed, the mind starts to forget. And when the mind forgets, so does the body. Your energy drops, your focus weakens, your sense of purpose begins to fade. You become a shell of what you once believed you could be. But here's the power of this truth: the moment you take even one small action, you interrupt that process. You step back into alignment. You say, no, this is who I am, and you don't need anyone else to see it or validate it. The act itself is enough. That one step is a course correction. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real, because one action breaks the chain of self-abandonment. One movement reminds your brain that you're not done yet. Over time, those micro movements accumulate into something massive. They form the mental architecture of a resilient identity. They transform you into someone who doesn't need permission to act. Someone who doesn't wait to feel perfect. Someone who knows that momentum isn't a mood, it's a choice. That's the power of no 0 days. You're not just building a habit, you're building you. Change is rarely loud. It doesn't always come with sparks or applause. In fact, the most profound transformations often happen in silence, behind the scenes, without instant feedback or visible reward. This is what makes the process so difficult for many people. They take small, meaningful steps day after day, and it feels like nothing is happening. The mirror doesn't reflect much difference. The bank account doesn't move. The scale barely budges. And they start to wonder, is any of this even working? But deep within the brain, under the surface, something powerful is always unfolding. The nervous system is adapting. The habits are taking root. The identity is reshaping itself. Change is happening, even when you can't see it yet. The human brain is always learning. It doesn't turn off. Every repeated behavior, no matter how small, gets logged and processed. The more often you perform a specific action, the more efficiently your brain becomes at executing it. This is due to a process called synaptic pruning and strengthening. Neural pathways that are used frequently become faster, stronger, and more automatic. And those that aren't used begin to fade. So when you're showing up every day, putting in effort even when it feels pointless, you're actually carving a path through your brain's architecture. You're laying down the circuitry for a new normal. It's not dramatic, but it's real. This is where most people give up. They do the right things for a few days or weeks, but because they don't see immediate results, they assume nothing is working. What they don't realize is that real change is like building a foundation underground. The work isn't visible right away because the structure is still forming. Progress often lags behind effort. There's a delay between doing and seeing. But just because the feedback isn't instant doesn't mean it's not coming. Your brain is adapting with every repetition. Your nervous system is absorbing every experience. The change is always happening. It just hasn't surfaced yet. The cerebellum and basal ganglia, parts of the brain responsible for motor control and habit formation, don't rely on how motivated you feel. They rely on how often you repeat something. These systems are designed to automate. Their job is to take conscious effort and turn it into unconscious behavior. When you practice something regularly, it shifts from being a decision to being a default. And this is why no 0 days matters so much, because it feeds these deeper, quieter systems of change. Every day you don't skip. Every time you take even a small action, you're reinforcing that automation. You're shifting from effort to identity. Progress is rarely visible at the beginning. The hardest work is often done when there's no evidence that it's paying off. That's the test. Can you keep going when no one's watching, when there's no applause, when it feels like you're failing, but you're actually laying down the exact patterns that will make success inevitable? That's what separates those who transform from those who plateau. The willingness to trust the process even when the process feels invisible. That's not blind optimism. That's neuroscience. You may not see the change right away, but your brain is changing every time you repeat the behavior. Emotionally, this can be draining. It's frustrating to show up day after day and feel like you're stuck in the same place. But it's important to remember that emotion is not always an accurate reflection of progress. You can feel stuck and still be moving. You can feel uncertain and still be becoming. Emotional signals are just data. They don't always speak the truth. The real truth is in the repetition. The act of continuing, of refusing to quit, is the clearest sign that you are changing, whether your emotions recognize it or not. Eventually, the progress will become visible. The shift will emerge. The body will respond. The mind will sharpen. The external will begin to reflect the internal work. But it's not magic. It's consistency. It's biology. It's the result of saying yes to daily effort, even when it feels like no one sees it and nothing's happening. That's the work. That's the rewiring. That's how transformation happens. In the quiet, in the unseen, in the small wins that most people ignore. No 0 days is a mindset built for this reality. It's the strategy that honors the long game. It doesn't chase speed. It chases truth. It understands that the brain rewards what is repeated, that the identity you're building isn't forged in loud victories, but in silent decisions made consistently. Progress doesn't always announce itself, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. If you keep going, it always catches up. It just shows up later than you think, and stronger than you ever imagined.